I went to the Ouachita National Forest in October of 2018 to train for a winter thru hike. I needed quiet, uneven ground, and a place where I could move for hours without seeing anyone. The plan was simple: walk in late afternoon, hike until dark, camp, then break camp early and hike out. I wanted to test my layering, my stove, and my patience when things were dull and cold. No one wanted to drive 5 hours for wet leaves and freeze-dried meals, so I went alone. The trailhead sat off a narrow forest road. The gravel lot held no cars. Leaves covered the edges, pressed flat by rain. A notice board leaned to one side. The only paper left was a sun-faded warning about controlled burns from the year before. The corners had curled. The staples had rusted. Nothing else was posted. No maps. No closures. The woods were quiet in that late-day way, when insects still buzz but birds settle down. I shouldered my pack and stepped onto the trail. The ground felt right under my boots. Damp but firm. Oak leaves stuck to the soles. The air smelled like pine sap and old water. I moved at an easy pace, letting my body warm up. The trail wound through mixed forest, with short climbs and shallow dips. After about a mile, I noticed the light changing. The sun slid lower, filtering through branches at a flat angle. Long shadows cut across the path. Around 3 miles in, something began to feel off. Not fear, more like a sense of repetition. I saw the same shapes too often. A shallow dip that held water even after dry weeks. A boulder near the trail shaped like a split tooth. White quartz running through dark stone. I checked my watch. Time was moving. My legs felt the distance. Still, the forest ahead looked the same as the forest behind. That was when I noticed the tree line on my left. Pines stood in a straight line, their trunks evenly spaced. The ground beneath them was bare. No saplings, no fallen limbs, no thick brush. It looked cleaned. The line ran on and on without bending. It did not follow the trail. It cut across the land as if drawn with a ruler. On my right, the woods were normal. Hardwoods tangled with vines. Fallen logs, ferns. Insects buzzed there. Leaves rustled. Birds shifted. I slowed down and paid attention to my feet. Without meaning to, I had drifted left. The trail itself curved right, but my steps pulled toward the pines. I corrected my path and stayed centered. After a few minutes, I realized I had drifted again. The clean tree line stayed beside me. The trail bent. The line did not. It stayed straight. I stopped and checked my GPS. The arrow pointed forward. The track showed a steady line. My speed was normal. I should have been moving deeper. I walked again. The same dip appeared. The same boulder. I stepped off the trail to the right into brush just to break the pattern. Thorns scraped my shin. I stepped back onto the trail and kept going. The pines remained on my left. They made no sound. Wind moved through the rest of the forest, but not there. I could hear insects on my right, a low, steady sound. On the left, there was nothing. The light grew thin. The sun dropped behind the ridgeline. Colors drained from the woods. Greens turned gray. Browns flattened. I told myself the pines marked an old plantation. Straight rows were common in parts of Arkansas. Fire breaks cut clean lines. Old logging scars stayed visible for decades. None of that explained why I kept drifting toward it, or why my sense of distance felt wrong. My GPS still showed forward progress. The map matched the trail. No loops, no switchbacks. I became aware of another sound. Not a step, not a branch snapping. It sounded like weight shifting on packed ground. A subtle scrape, then a pause. It stayed to my left, inside the pines. When I slowed, it slowed. When I stopped, it stopped. I waited, holding still, listening. My breath sounded loud. Nothing else moved. I walked again. The sound returned, perfectly matched. No rush, no stumble, just steady presence. I never saw anything between the trunks. The spacing made it easy to see deep into the stand. There were no shadows moving, no shape. The sound stayed low and even, like someone careful not to be heard. I felt my focus narrow. I checked the time. Sunset was close. I did not want to camp near whatever this was. I also did not want to run blind through unfamiliar woods. I marked my position on the GPS. The screen still showed I was miles in. The track line ran straight. That made no sense. The ground around me had not changed. No new ridges, no crossings. The sound shifted closer, still parallel. I imagined a person walking along a service road inside the pines. The clean ground suggested maintenance. A forest worker, a hunter, someone curious. None of those ideas explained the perfect pacing or the silence when I stopped. I made a choice. I turned right and cut straight into the brush, away from the pines and the trail. Branches grabbed my pack. Thorns tore at my pants. I forced my way through, pushing hard, not caring about noise. My legs burned. Leaves slid under my boots. I felt warm blood run down my calf. I kept a straight line, watching my compass, counting steps. After a short burst, the brush thinned. The ground leveled. I broke through and almost stumbled onto packed dirt. It was the trail. Not the one I had been on, but the same trail closer to the trailhead. My car sat visible through the trees, less than 50 yards away. I stood there, breathing hard, confused. I checked the GPS again. The map still showed me deep in. The distance marker said I had barely moved. My track line looked wrong, compressed, as if folded over itself. I walked to the car and leaned against it, listening. The forest sounded normal again. Insects buzzed on both sides. Wind moved through all the trees. I drove home that night. I did not camp. Later, I looked into the area. The left side of the trail ran alongside an old pine plantation bordered by a firebreak road. The straight line matched the boundary. The ground was kept clear to stop burns from spreading. The road ran parallel to the trail for a long stretch before looping back near the trailhead. A person walking that road could pace someone on the trail without being seen. The silence made sense. Packed dirt carries less sound. The drifting made sense too. Human paths tend to pull attention. My brain likely followed the clean line without noticing. The GPS issue came down to signal bounce. Dense trees and uneven ground can compress tracks, making forward movement look stalled. The repeated terrain came from walking near a loop where the trail doubled back close to itself. The dip and the boulder sat near that overlap. All of it had an explanation. None of it felt good. I still train alone, but I avoid places where the land looks too ordered on one side and wild on the other. When the woods feel wrong, I trust that feeling. It is not fear of something unknown. It is my mind noticing patterns before I can name them. I went into the woods to check an old property line that had not been walked in years. My uncle owned land near the edge of a large state forest, and a survey map from the 1980s showed a boundary that cut through thick timber. He asked me to follow it, take notes, and mark anything that looked damaged or encroached on. I had hiked and hunted most of my life, so this felt routine. I parked my truck at a locked service gate and walked in just after sunrise with a pack, a paper map, and a handheld GPS. The woods were quiet in a normal way at first. Damp leaves covered the ground, and my boots sank slightly with each step. The air smelled like wet bark and cold soil. Thin fog sat low between the trees and lifted slowly as the light grew stronger. The forest was mostly hardwood, tall trunks spaced far apart, with younger growth filling the gaps. I followed an old blaze line, faint red paint scars that had faded into the bark over decades. I moved slow and careful, stopping often to match the trees to the map. After about an hour, I noticed the ground looked disturbed in places where it should not have been. Branches were snapped low, not from wind, but bent and broken by weight. Leaves were pressed flat in narrow paths that ran off the line I was following. I crouched and touched one of the flattened spots. The leaves were still damp but warm underneath. That told me whatever passed through had done so recently. I stood and listened. I heard nothing but my own breathing and a distant woodpecker. I continued deeper, but I stopped trusting the map as much. Some of the blaze marks were gone entirely. Others had been scraped over with fresh cuts. Not paint, just shallow lines in the bark. They did not match survey marks or trail signs. They were uneven, placed too high or too low. A few trees had multiple marks close together, as if someone had tested the blade more than once. I told myself it could be vandalism or hunters marking paths, but it did not feel random. The forest floor sloped down into a shallow basin where water collected. The ground there was soft, almost muddy. That is where I saw the footprints clearly. They were boot prints, large, with a deep heel and wide toe. The tread was sharp. They did not follow a straight line. They wandered, looped, then stopped. Near one print was a drag mark, light but clear, as if something heavy had been pulled for a short distance and then lifted. I felt my stomach tighten. I stood still for a long time, listening again. Still nothing. I checked my GPS. I was well within the forest boundary, far from marked trails. That was expected, but it meant no one should have been camping or working out there without permits. I thought about turning back, but I had daylight and experience, and I did not feel immediate danger. I kept going, slower now, scanning ahead before each step. The smell reached me before I saw anything else. It was not strong, but it was wrong. It reminded me of spoiled meat mixed with damp cloth. It came and went as I moved, stronger near fallen trees, weaker in open areas. I followed the blaze line to a point where it crossed a narrow ridge. On the far side, tucked between two downed logs, was a low structure made from sticks and plastic sheeting. It was built close to the ground, almost hidden. The plastic was dark and dirty, weighed down with rocks. I did not approach it. I did not need to. I could see enough from where I stood. Near the structure were scattered items. An empty food can crushed flat, a torn glove, pieces of rope cut unevenly. The ground around it was packed hard, stained darker than the surrounding soil. I felt exposed standing there, like I had stepped into a space that was not meant to be found. I backed away slowly, placing my feet carefully to avoid noise. As I turned, I noticed more markings on nearby trees. These were not random scratches. They formed rough shapes repeated again and again. Not symbols I recognized, just patterns, consistent enough to show intention. I followed them with my eyes and realized they created a loose boundary around the area. I was standing inside it. That is when I heard movement behind me. Not fast, not loud, just a shift of weight, leaves pressing down, then stopping. I did not turn. I focused on breathing slow and steady. My body wanted to move, but my mind told me to wait. I listened again. Another shift. Closer this time. Still no rushing, no panic. Whoever it was knew I was there. They were not hiding it anymore. I stepped forward, slow and deliberate, moving toward thicker trees. I kept my posture calm, not hunched, not tense. I did not want to look like prey. The movement followed, matching my pace. I caught a glimpse of shape through the trees, tall and narrow, blending with the trunks. It stayed just far enough back to remain unclear. That was worse than seeing it fully. The forest felt smaller then. Every tree seemed closer, every sound louder. I moved downhill, away from the ridge, choosing uneven ground to make tracking harder. The smell returned, stronger now, clinging to the air. I passed another disturbed area, fresh footprints crossing my path, cutting me off from the direction I had come. That told me I was not dealing with one person moving randomly. This was controlled. I adjusted my route toward a stream I had crossed earlier. Water leaves signs. It also makes noise. I hoped it would give me cover. As I moved, the sounds behind me stopped. That silence felt deliberate. I did not relax. I kept going until I heard water ahead. The stream was wider than I remembered, swollen from recent rain. The banks were slick. I did not hesitate. I stepped into the water and crossed at an angle, letting the current erase my tracks. The cold bit hard, but I welcomed it. On the far side, I climbed quickly and moved upstream along exposed rock, then cut back into the trees. I did not hear movement again for a long time. My legs burned. My hands shook from cold and fear. I kept checking my GPS, adjusting course toward the service road. The forest slowly returned to a normal state. Bird sounds came back. The smell faded. The ground looked untouched again. When I finally saw the gate through the trees, I did not slow down until my hand was on it. I unlocked it, stepped through, and locked it behind me. I stood there for several minutes, listening. Nothing followed me out. I reported the markings and the structure to the state forestry office, leaving out my personal reaction and focusing on facts. Weeks later, I was told the area was closed for investigation due to illegal activity. They did not share details. They did not need to. I have worked landlines since then, but I no longer go alone into places that show signs of human presence without reason. Animals leave chaos. People leave patterns. That day, I crossed into a pattern I was not meant to see. I got out because I stayed calm, moved with purpose, and listened when the woods stopped feeling empty. I went into the woods to map old logging roads for a personal project. I had quit my warehouse job 2 weeks earlier and needed days that felt useful. The forest sat on public land, a mixed stand of pine and hardwood that had been cut hard decades ago. The roads no longer showed on new maps. That was the point. I parked at a gravel pullout and walked in under a sky that stayed low and gray. The air smelled of damp bark and cold soil. The ground held last night's rain without turning to mud. Each step felt firm and quiet. I carried a light pack, water, a notebook, a phone with offline maps, and a compass. I wore boots I trusted. I planned a loop that would keep me near a creek before climbing a ridge and dropping back to the truck. The first hour passed cleanly. I noted old culverts and cut banks where the road had been pushed into the hill. I found rusted cable half buried, saplings grown through it like bone through skin. Birds moved but stayed far. The woods felt used but not busy. The first sign that shifted my mood came near the creek. I smelled smoke that did not belong to the season. It carried a greasy edge, not the sharp smell of leaves. I stopped and listened. Water slid over stones. Wind touched the crowns. Nothing else. I kept moving, slower now, watching the ground. I found a boot print at the edge of the bank. The tread looked modern and deep. It faced upstream. I stepped back and checked my own soles. They did not match. I told myself the land was public and people came through. That thought did not settle. I followed the creek for another half-mile. The smoke smell grew stronger, then faded, then returned. Came and went with the bends. I reached a place where the old road crossed the water on a line of stones. On the far side, the brush opened into a flat bench. There, set back under young firs, sat a low structure made of tarp and branches. It blended well. From a distance, it looked like shade. Up close, it looked planned. I did not step closer. I scanned for movement. I saw none. I noticed a snare wire looped at ankle height along a game trail that cut past the bench. It had been placed with care. Another sat higher, aimed at a deer's chest. Both wires shone faintly where they had been handled. I felt a tight pull in my stomach. This was not legal. It was not abandoned. The smoke smell made sense now. I backed away without turning my back to the bench. I placed my feet where I had stepped before. When I reached the creek, I crossed and moved downstream instead of back. I wanted distance. The land narrowed and rose. The road faded to a line of moss and stone. The woods grew thicker. I kept checking behind me. I did not see anyone. The feeling of being watched grew anyway, like a pressure behind my eyes. An hour later, I climbed onto the ridge. The wind picked up. It brought the smell again, closer now, mixed with a sour note that made my mouth go dry. I cut off the ridge toward my planned descent. That was when I found the second camp. This one sat higher, tucked into a cut where the hill broke. It held a fire pit ringed with stones still warm. Grease stains marked the rocks. Plastic jug lay on its side. Nearby, a pile of hides lay covered with brush. Flies rose when the wind shifted. I felt anger then, sharp and bright, and fear layered beneath it. I had walked into someone else's work. I turned away at once. I chose a line that would drop me fast toward the truck, off trail, through thicker ground. I marked my bearing and moved. The woods closed around me. Branches snagged my sleeves. The slope steepened. I slid and caught myself. Halfway down, I heard a sound that did not fit. It was a scrape, metal on stone, brief and close. I froze. My breath felt loud in my chest. I waited. The wind moved. Leaves clicked together. Nothing else came. I started again, slower. I took 10 steps and heard it once more, farther upslope now. Then another sound, the dull thud of something set down. I did not look back. I did not run. I changed direction by a few degrees and kept moving. My legs burned. My mouth tasted like pennies. I reached a narrow draw choked with alder. The ground turned slick. At the bottom, I found more wire. A snare hung low across the draw, almost invisible. I stopped short. I stepped over it and cut left, careful now with every step. The pattern became clear. The snares were placed to funnel animals and people alike. The camps sat to watch the paths. The ridge offered sightlines. I moved with my head down, scanning for shine. I found 2 more wires and avoided them. My hands shook. I felt clumsy. I slowed until my breathing settled. The draw opened into a wider slope and the trees spaced out. Through them, I saw the road. Relief hit hard and made me weak. That was when I saw movement near the edge of the trees, between me and the truck. A shape stood still, half hidden, then shifted weight. I could not make out a face. The body looked heavy under a coat too thick for the day. The person did not approach. The person did not leave. I angled right, keeping a stand of pines between us, and walked with purpose. I did not glance back again. I reached the road and followed it downhill, fast now. My boots slapped gravel. The sound felt risky, but the open space felt safer than the trees. I came around the last bend and saw my truck. I did not stop until the door shut and locked. I sat there shaking, hands on the wheel, watching the tree lean. No one came out. I drove to the ranger station without stopping. I laid out the details in writing, locations marked, bearings noted, times logged. I showed the photos I had taken of the wires and camps. I explained the smoke, the fresh fire, the movement. The staff took it seriously. They thanked me and told me to wait. I did. Weeks later, I learned what followed. Officers found the camps and removed dozens of snares. They seized equipment and hides. They cited 2 people for illegal hunting and endangerment. The ridge offered clear sight to the draws. The placement of wires matched my notes. My photos helped confirm timing. The case held. I went back once, months later, with permission to finish my mapping. The woods felt different, not safer, just honest again. The camps were gone. The wires were gone. The creek ran clean. I stayed on open ground. I left early. I still think about the weight of that coat and the way the shape did not move. I think about how easy it would have been to miss the shine of wire. The woods did not hide anything that day. They showed me exactly what was there. I was scouting elk because I had waited years to draw that tag and I wanted to do it right. Early season meant learning the ground before snow pushed animals down. I arrived a week ahead of time with no pressure to hunt, only to watch, listen, and mark routes. The locals I spoke with treated it like routine talk. Weather, roads, access gates. One of them mentioned a rule about whistling. Do not whistle back if you hear it. He said it without emphasis, like he was talking about mud on boots. I assumed he meant other hunters trying to locate each other or mess around. I did not think about it again. The area sat high enough that mornings started cold even in early fall. Frost-coated grass in the open draws. Timber covered most slopes, thick stands broken by old burns and rocky benches. I set up camp well away from roads and planned to glass ridges at first light, then moved slowly through timber mid-morning. The first morning passed clean. I spotted sign but no animals. I learned how the wind slid through the basin as the sun rose, pulling air downhill until mid-morning before switching. That mattered. I went to sleep tired but calm. The second morning began the same. I climbed before dawn, moving slow to keep sweat down. I reached a ridge as light filled the valley. I sat with my back against a rock, glassing timber edges where elk liked to step out. The forest below lay still. No birds yet, just wind high above the canopy. That was when I heard the whistle. 2 notes, clear, short pause between them. It cut through the woods in a way natural sounds do not. It did not echo like a bird call. It did not wobble. It sounded controlled. human lungs pushing air with intent. I stayed still. Other hunters were in the unit, though I had not seen anyone. Whistling could be someone signaling a partner. Came from downhill, somewhere inside the timber. I waited. 10 minutes passed. The sun climbed. I lifted my binoculars again. The whistle came again. Same clarity, different direction. This time it was uphill behind me. Not close, not far. The distance felt measured. My skin tightened along my arms. Wind had not shifted enough for someone to circle that fast without being heard. I had not moved. My position was hidden from below. Still, the sound found my back. I stood and broke down my setup without rushing. Tripod folded. Binoculars stowed. I did not want to look jumpy. I began descending the ridge along a side route I had scouted the day before, keeping timber between me and open slopes. The ground was soft with needles and damp soil. My steps stayed quiet. The whistle followed. It did not repeat the same pattern. Sometimes it was one long note, sometimes 3 short ones. Once it sounded almost playful, then sharp again. Each time it came from a place I could not see. Always timber, always behind cover. It never moved into the open. It stayed just far enough back that I could not pinpoint it, but close enough that I knew it tracked me. I focused on moving well. Slow steps, no clatter. I kept my breathing steady. I told myself it was another hunter messing around. Maybe bored, maybe curious. That explanation did not fit the way the sound stayed behind me, adjusting as I changed direction. I cut left across a slope. The whistle came from above again. I dropped lower. It shifted with me. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Birds stayed gone. Squirrels did not chatter. Even the wind felt distant under the canopy. I reached a steeper section where loose rock covered the trail. My foot slid. I caught myself, but my rifle slipped from my shoulder and hit the ground with a dull crack against stone. The whistling stopped. The silence that followed pressed in harder than the sound ever had. No wind, no insects. I stood still, one hand on the rifle, listening. My heart hammered in my chest. I waited for the whistle to return. Instead, I felt air move near my ear. One slow breath, close enough that warmth brushed my skin. It was not loud. It was careful, like someone controlling their lungs to stay quiet. I did not turn. I did not freeze. I moved. I ran downhill without thinking about footing or noise. Branches whipped my face. Roots grabbed my boots. My lungs burned within seconds. I did not slow until my legs screamed. The forest rushed past in streaks of dark and light. Behind me, there were no footsteps I could hear, but the pressure stayed. The sense of being chased did not fade until the trees thinned and the ground leveled. I burst out onto the road near my truck and stumbled to a stop, hands on my knees, pulling air hard into my chest. The world came back in pieces. Wind through grass, a bird calling somewhere far off. My ears rang. I drove back to camp and packed everything without stopping. I did not glass again. I did not hike. I left the unit before noon and did not return. At home, with distance and sleep, I worked through what likely happened. Elk hunters use whistles and calls. So do people who want attention. A person could track someone by sound and movement, staying in timber, using terrain to stay hidden. The changing patterns made sense if the goal was to test reaction, to see if I would answer or reveal myself. When I dropped the rifle, the noise gave away exact position. The whistle stopped because the person no longer needed it. The breath was the hardest part to accept, but not impossible. Dense timber carries sound poorly. Someone close, moving carefully, could approach without snapping branches. Adrenaline sharpens sensation. Warm air could have been real, or it could have been my own breath rushing back past my ear as I turned my head. Memory under stress fills gaps fast. I never heard footsteps because I was already running when it mattered. Whoever it was did not chase me into the open. They did not need to. Their goal was never clear, and that is what unsettled me most. I sold my tag that week, not because of fear of the woods, but because I learned something about isolation that morning. Being alone does not just mean no one is there to help. It also means no one is there to see what happens. Some people use that. I decided I did not want to be that far from the road again. listening for sounds that do not belong and hoping they stop. The trip was meant to be a clean ending to everything familiar. College started in 2 weeks. Summer jobs were over. We wanted one last stretch of quiet before life split us up. Fishing felt harmless and ordinary. My uncle loaned us his old aluminum boat, the kind with scratched paint and a small outboard that rattled even at idle. The lake sat far from any highway, ringed by thick forest and low hills. We chose it because it was not busy and because none of us had been there before. We crossed the lake in late afternoon. The water lay flat and dark, reflecting clouds that looked heavier than they were. The shoreline on the far side rose gently, covered in trees that reached right to the water. No docks, no signs, no clearings. We idled along until we found a narrow stretch of gravel and mud where the boat could nose in without scraping. We hauled our packs up the bank and tied the boat to a low branch. From the water, the place looked untouched. That was the appeal. Once on shore, the feeling shifted. There was no trail leading inland, no fire ring, no cut stumps. The ground behind the narrow strip of shore dropped into dense woods almost at once. The trees stood close together, their lower branches thick and tangled. The air felt still. Even then, it struck me as odd that there were no signs of use. No broken limbs, no flattened grass. People had camped there before, surely, but nothing showed it. We set up the tent close to the water where the ground was level. The lake lapped quietly a few feet away. The light faded fast once the sun dipped behind the hills. We cooked simple food and ate without much talk, tired from the trip over. As dark settled in, the woods behind us stayed quiet. Not calm quiet, empty quiet. No birds calling down for the night. No insects starting up. The lake made small sounds. The forest made none. That silence pressed in more once we crawled into the tent. The nylon walls held the smell of damp earth and old leaves. I lay awake longer than I expected, listening. My body waited for familiar noises that never came. Usually there is something. A mouse. Wind in the branches. Water dripping. Here there was only the lake and our own movement. Sometime around midnight, the sound started. It was close enough that it felt like it came from the air just beyond the tent wall. Slow breaths, deep ones, air drawn in, held, then let out again. Not quick, not sharp, full, steady breathing like lungs working at rest. The sound did not scrape or snort. It did not sniff the ground. It simply breathed. At first, my mind reached for the most common answer. A bear. The thought did not calm me, but it gave shape to the fear. Bears make noise. They huff. They breathe heavy. I held still, listening harder. The breathing stayed even. Too even. It moved around the tent in a slow circle. The sound shifted from one side to the other without the crunch of leaves or the press of feet. It felt as if the air itself was moving around us. The circle continued. Close. Close enough that I could picture a chest rising inches from the fabric. My skin prickled with the urge to move, to grab something, to make noise. I stayed still. The tent walls did not brush or press. Nothing touched us. Only the breathing, steady and patient. When my friend shifted beside me, the breathing stopped at once. Not faded, not slowed. Cut off as if someone had closed a valve. The silence that followed was worse. Felt focused. The lake still made its soft sounds. The woods remained dead quiet. Whatever had been there was now waiting. After a long stretch, the breathing returned. It resumed right where it left off, same pace, same depth. It began circling again. The path stayed tight around the tent. I tried to count the seconds between breaths, but my thoughts scattered. My chest felt tight. My mouth went dry. I thought about how thin the tent wall was. I thought about how little space lay between us and whatever filled the dark. The breathing went on for what felt like hours, though it could not have been that long. At some point, exhaustion pulled me under despite the fear. Sleep came in short, broken drops. Morning light woke me. Pale and gray, it filtered through the tent fabric. The breathing was gone. The woods stayed quiet, but the silence felt different in daylight. Less pressing. We unzipped the tent and stepped out together. The air was cold and damp. The lake lay still. Around the tent, the ground told a story we had not seen in the dark. The soil was soft near the water, mixed with sand and leaf rot. All around the tent were shallow depressions, not tracks with clear edges or shapes, just pressed areas where weight had leaned in. Some sat close to the tent wall, close enough that something large would have been towering over us. The impressions were uneven, as if made by a body shifting its balance rather than stepping. There were no claw marks, no torn fabric, no scat. Nothing else disturbed the sight. The depressions formed a loose ring, heavier on the side facing the woods. We stood there in silence, staring at the ground. The excitement of fishing never surfaced. We broke camp fast, careless with our packing. The tent went in damp and dirty. Gear was shoved into packs without order. We pushed the boat off and started the motor. As the shore pulled away, I looked back at the line of trees. In daylight, the woods looked normal enough. Dense, green, still quiet. The place gave up no answers. Years passed before I learned enough to explain it in a way that fit all the details. The lake sat within known habitat for moose, though sightings were rare that far south. Moose move quietly for their size, especially on soft ground. They breathe loud when calm, lungs deep and slow. Their height puts their chest at tent level. When they stand still, their weight shifts, pressing the ground without stepping. A moose curious about a new object by the water could circle without brushing it, listening, scenting, learning. When a sound came from inside, it would freeze, alert, silent. The lack of footfalls made sense too. Wet soil absorbs sound. The silence of the woods at night can happen when larger animals pass through, pushing smaller ones away. The untouched shore was not empty. It was claimed. That explanation did not come right away. It came after reading, after time, after distance softened the memory. Even now, knowing what likely stood there breathing in the dark, the memory tightens my chest. The sound was real. The weight was real. The fear was earned. Whatever it was an animal doing what animals do. Curious, calm, close. That knowledge does not make the night feel smaller. It makes it sharper. I went back to the place my brother disappeared because I believed time had dulled the danger. 5 years felt like enough distance. The search had ended long ago. The case file had closed with no answers. I told myself I was not looking for him anymore. I was looking for peace, or at least an understanding of where things went wrong. The trailhead looked smaller than I remembered. The gravel turnout held 2 cars that belonged to day hikers. A wooden sign listed distances and elevation gain. Someone had added a new map in a clear plastic case. Beneath it, the old search notice was still there, faded and curled, edges chewed by weather. His name was barely readable now. I packed light. Water, snacks, a paper copy of the official search map, my phone, and a small first aid kit. I did not bring camping gear. I told myself I would turn around before dark. The sky was clear, the kind of pale blue that feels harmless. The forest smelled dry, late summer sliding toward fall. The first part of the hike followed the same trail my brother had taken. It was well-worn and easy to follow. Switchbacks climbed through mixed forest. Sunlight filtered through leaves in broken patches. I matched the map to the ground as I walked, noting landmarks the search report had listed. A rock outcrop, a shallow stream crossing, a bend where the trail narrowed. The official search area ended at a marked point on the map. A red line showed where ground teams had stopped after covering the terrain multiple times. Beyond that line, the map went blank. No trails, no notes. My brother had gone past that point during his hike, stepping off to look at something he thought he recognized from an old photo. That was the last confirmed detail. Past the search boundary, the trail thinned but did not vanish. The forest changed in small ways that added up. Trees grew closer together. The ground rose and fell more sharply. The air felt cooler, even though the sun still reached down. I slowed my pace and checked the map often, though it offered no help now. That was when I noticed the orange tape. It hung from branches at shoulder height, tied in short lengths. The color had faded to a dull rust. Some pieces had cracked and split, their edges sharp. This was not fresh. It was not placed by any organized group I recognized. Search and rescue used different markers, numbered and logged. These were random, uneven, spaced too far apart to mark a proper route. I followed the tape anyway. It did not form a straight line. It wandered, sometimes pulling me uphill, sometimes back down. I kept telling myself it was likely left by a hunter or a survey crew years ago. Still, my chest felt tight. The forest grew quieter the farther I went. Wind stirred the canopy, but not the lower branches. Birds stayed out of sight. About an hour in, I came to a tree with a wooden marker nailed to it. The wood was weathered, edges rough as if cut by hand. There were no numbers or symbols, only a name carved into the surface. My brother's nickname, almost right, one letter off. A small mistake that made it worse, not better. The carving looked old. The cuts were darkened with age. Sap had dried along the edges. I stood there longer than I meant to, staring at it, trying to decide what it meant. Someone had been here after he disappeared. Someone had known enough to try the name, but not enough to spell it the way our family did. I do not remember choosing to leave. The shift happened somewhere between my eyes and my feet. One moment I was standing still, the next I was moving fast, pushing through brush, no longer following tape or map. My breath came hard. My heart pounded so loud it filled my head. Behind me, branches snapped, not randomly, in bursts that matched my speed. When I slowed, the sound slowed. When I pushed harder, it stayed close. I did not look back. I focused on the slope ahead, on not tripping, on keeping air in my lungs. The forest blurred into narrow paths between trunks. Roots grabbed at my boots. Leaves slid underfoot. I scraped my arms and felt warmth where skin broke. The sounds behind me stayed just far enough back that I could not place them. No heavy steps, no animal noise I could name, just movement, steady and deliberate. I ran until my legs burned and my throat felt raw. The ground leveled out. Light brightened ahead. I broke through a line of trees and stumbled onto the road. Gravel bit into my palms as I fell to my knees. The forest stopped at the edge like a wall. No sound followed me out. I sat there for a long time before I could stand. My hands shook as I checked my phone. The screen showed 12 minutes of activity since I left the trail. 12 minutes since I marked my position near the tape. My watch told a different story. 3 hours had passed. The sun sat lower in the sky. Shadows stretched long across the road. At first, I thought the phone had lost signal. I refreshed the screen. The data stayed the same. No missing chunks. No error messages. Just a clean timeline that did not match my body or the light or the ache in my legs. I walked back to my car and sat inside with the door open, staring at the trees. My breathing slowed. The fear drained, leaving behind something dull and heavy. I drove home before dark. Later, I pieced together what likely happened. The area beyond the search boundary was a mess of intersecting animal paths, old logging spurs, and terrain that folded in on itself. The orange tape was likely left by a private search group that never coordinated with authorities. The wooden marker could have been placed by someone desperate, guessing, clinging to any sign. As for the running and the lost time, stress explains more than people like to admit. Panic compresses memory. Adrenaline stretches moments and erases others. Phones record movement based on signal and step data, not reality. Dense forest and steep ground can confuse both. My watch tracked continuous motion. My phone did not. The sounds behind me were likely my own, echoing through brush at a delay, mixed with animals startled by my movement. When fear takes over, the brain fills gaps with patterns that feel intentional. I have not gone back. I do not need to. I learned what I went there to learn. The woods did not take my brother because they are cruel or strange. They took him because they are complex, unforgiving, and indifferent to hope. That marker was not a message. It was proof that searching without limits creates more harm than answers. I left knowing that some places do not hold closure, only boundaries, and crossing them again would not bring him back.